I'll get start the meeting now. Can I have roll call, Mr. Karati?
Yeah, sorry, the mics are not a sound system. It just helps to get picked up in the video. So try to speak into them, but talk loud. Mr. Accomando?
Present.
Ms. Borelli?
Present.
Ms. Ainello?
Present.
Mr. Laurentino?
Present.
Ms. Mahoney?
Here.
Mr. Shear?
Here.
Ms. Torvik?
Present.
Ms. Traverso?
Present.
Ms. Zottarelli?
Please stand for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Which one is mine here? Okay, adequate notice of this meeting has been sent to all members of the Board of Education and to the Bergen Record in accordance with the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to the superintendent if she has a report. Sorry. Yeah, it goes directly to Mike. Get it? The mic goes to Mike.
I was like, does it go to you? Okay, I will save my report for Wednesday night's meeting. However, I do want to share with the board that under the board action items, should I do it now? The Hibbs grade self-assessment. So I did want to share that I received those today, and I'll share the scores with the Board of Ed, so that way everyone has the information with them.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Karati, would you like to do yours or wait till Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday too.
Okay. Jen, we're doing, where's the agenda? Here we go. Come on, board action items B2122.34 to B2122.36. Any questions?
No, that's it. Yeah.
I got confused with it. Okay, Mr. Discussion. Does Victoria do hers or I do it? Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry. Education curriculum, any questions for B212248 to B212254?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Richard Shear.
All right, the finance and budget facilities, F2122.71 through F2122.82. Questions, comments?
Just I'd like to elaborate on 78, 79, and 80. What this is, I know the board I gave you in your explanation, in your notes. So for the public, in last school year, we did the budget for 21-22. We were able to budget for a capital lease financing. We could do purchase equipment and paid over 5 years. So we were able to budget for an annual lease payment. So that is for equipment, and the equipment that we're going to do, I thought it could get done, but everything's pushed back now. Things used to get in a couple months. It's taken 6 months. Everything's double. So last month we approved the HVAC equipment at Franklin and Helen Smith. So that'll get done. That's been ordered. So hopefully that'll get installed in the summer. The next two items we're looking at, and the bid is going to get delayed. It'll probably be in the late fall, early winter. Is we have 2 boilers in each elementary school, and the boilers at the backup boiler at Washington and Franklin are in the 80s, so they need to get replaced. So that's 2 items that we're ticketing on the capital improvement. And the last piece will be to fund phase 1 of the Washington School playground, moving it from the side of Market Street to the other side of the building. You might have saw that presentation a couple meetings ago. So we're able to fund phase one, which will be the equipment, the play surface, and we're also going to have the fencing going around there. And then in the future years, fundraising and budgets could probably get some other equipment. But that's what that does. This approves the financial people and bond counsel to go out for the financing and the resolution we need to secure that financing. Any questions on that?
I have a question on a different number.
Sure.
Number 76, were they so in bad of disarray, this equipment that we got to chuck them, or can we donate it to somebody?
They are out of commission.
Out of commission, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Had it for a long
also
time.
would like to add .81, the donation, Gift of Life America. I just would like to share with the board that one of our speech therapists, Christine Laganella at Smith School, her father is the president of Gift of Life, and they donated assorted PPE to the district, and we were able to distribute it across to every building, to the nurse's office, so that way they had access to it. And then also for .82, that's the agreement with ESS, our substitute service, that I spoke to the board about increasing the rate of our building-based subs. That was emailed to me this evening. I see it, so I will share it with Mr. Karate tomorrow. We did have 2 building-based subs start today with that new rate, one at Washington, one at Long School, and then we have definitely one more, maybe 2 scheduled to start next week.
Okay, Mr. Laurentino.
Policy, the first reading, we have 212, 2.5, P9560. Second reading, we have 2122.6. I guess one of you are most interested in this one is dressing rooms for students. What we did was allowing this policy classes for students to wear their PE uniform to school each day. And amending part of the physical education clothing to add solid black leggings or thick material permitted as part of the PE uniform, which is going to be for our first reading. So we're not going to affect until we have the second reading.
It could be
Any questions or comments? Any other ones?
Okay. Questions?
Sorry, I do have a question. So they're allowed to wear their gym uniform to school, but yet in gym, they can or they cannot wear black solid leggings.
The way the uniform policy it currently reads, leggings are not permitted as part of as part of the regular or as part of gym.
Or-
Correct. Maybe with a skirt over it, I believe,
Okay,
under a skirt.
now that makes it clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martino. Ms. Otterelli, any negotiations?
Not yet, but soon, hopefully.
Okay, personnel, Mr. Traverso.
Okay. With regards to P212266 through P12272, are there any questions or comments?
Okay. So we'll save the committee for Wednesday, or? Anybody want to do PTA tonight, or, I'm sorry, PTO, tonight or Wednesday, or?
Wednesday's fine.
I don't have
Okay, I do, but I'll wait till Wednesday. I have one of the best presidents ever. Right, Ms. Carberry? I don't see her. Okay, any correspondence? Okay, So I will open the meeting for public.
I'm sorry. I need to go back.
Oh, yeah, you know what, you're right. I got to say something.
Under facilities and budget, I'm sorry, I didn't figure out the name for the workshops. The Orton Building Act, who is attending that? With professional development?
Off the top, let me just check the link, but off the top of my head, I know it's teaching at Franklin School attending for it.
What grade level?
One's resource room, one's a special education teacher, and one's grade room.
And are they currently to,
What number is it?
it's under,
That is, let me just double check that. One is a special education teacher at Smith School, the LLD classroom. These are the last ones. Just that one. Maybe four.
one day for a teacher. Now, are the other schools using?
They are. Many of our teachers have been trained in Norton from years ago, but a lot of these teachers have not had any formalized training. We had looked into previously when I was director, having someone come into the district to train our primary grade teachers with Norton. Price is extremely high. So as we're putting in for it,
Have we ever considered having a master teacher, so they have a master teacher that goes for all special training, and then they can sort of be and train everybody in tradition?
we have, and I don't want to misspeak, I hate to say this without being, without speaking to my administrative team, but I believe we have two, if not three, definitely one that would be considered a master teacher. It's just allowing a lot of time. The time right now is the biggest struggle, to schedule that. But I will look into that for the 3 hours and speak.
Oh, no, I mean, just.
Okay, the old business, new business.
Through the chair, I don't know if it's really not business or old business, but I'd like to congratulate my
Hey, yes.
nuptials and recently had. I will reiterate Wednesday night, I'd like to congratulate Mrs. Traverso, Mrs. Violetti, and Mrs. Torvik for their acknowledgement and invitation to the Women of History for the month.
Thank you. Thank you.
Big five
Yeah. No. And also, I'd like to just add that if you want to get a Colin Strong shirt, you can go through Reprint Marketing, and $10 for each shirt goes towards Stern Family. So thank you to Vic Yaramillo and everyone involved with that. And also thank you to the Ambulance Corps for what they did in helping with the rec, wrestling, or cheerleading. So thank you to and the custodial staff, coaches, all that. Thank you. And that's it. Oh, Cpag, yeah. Would you guys like to speak tonight, Wednesday night, or both nights? Or? Okay. Okay, so I'll open it up and then the floor is all yours. Okay. Okay. Open up meeting for public comment. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, just got this. Didn't it get really small? I could still read this if you want. Good Lord, can I get glasses?
It'll be quick. I just want to yell at you.
Yeah. A little bit here. Okay, residents are requested to state their names, address, and subject matter. In the event it appears the public comment portion of this meeting may exceed 45 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made
I
by a
know this.
participant to 5-minute durations. Issues raised by members of the public public may or may not be responded to by the board. All comments will be considered and a response will be forthcoming if and when appropriate. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of the individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding students and employees of the Board of Education are discouraged and will not be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. The board bears no responsibility nor will it be liable for any comment made by members of the public. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of the legal rights of those affected or identified
Thanks,
in their
Matt.
comments and be
I
aware
just
that
want
they
to
are
make sure
legally
the policy goes
responsible
through.
and liable for their comments. All right, just
Get-
roll off.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Oh, I don't need these. Michelle Roloff, 38 West Wing Ave, Saddlebrook, New Jersey. Happy birthday, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody, to the board this year. It's good to see all you. So when I was on the board, before I left, I wanted to visit the policy of the uniform. And when we discussed it, leggings was on the first reading, I believe. We allowed the leggings and the sweats. And then moving forward, when I left, it was on the agenda that we were going to approve it. But then somehow the meeting changed and then it was taken off that leggings were permitted. I guess you're going to say something at the end of my speech, right? So now it's back on the agenda after another meeting. So it would have been the second reading tonight or Wednesday if it was not removed the last meeting, correct? This is important for me because I put the motion into motion to have this change for the children. I think it's important that they're very comfortable going to school nowadays. Thank God the masks are off. And I think that it just frees up some of the teachers and the principals of having to dress code everybody because they are in sweats or they're in their leggings. I know there's always lines outside of the classrooms for lineup and they're missing their school work because they're getting dress coded. I hear it from a lot of people in town. This is actually a big thing for some people. It might not be a big thing as far as the budget, but it is a big thing as far as the parents are concerned. So I'm glad you decided to put it back on the agenda for the kids. And I hope that we get a unanimous vote, because I believe the first time it was unanimous that we were going to keep leggings on. And then today it would have been passed and they would have been allowed. So it was a little setback, but I'm glad you chose to revisit it and put it back on. And I thank you. So let's get all a yes vote for Wednesday, hopefully. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it part, do they have to take their leggings off and put sweats on for gym? Is that how you said it? No, leggings part of gym, okay.
So then they could have used one.
They could.
Technically, yes, yeah.
That is very unclear to me. And I got a different answer, and now it's back to what I thought it was.
So at the end?
Just real quick, they have leggings, bottom line. that's it.
Okay, so they can wear leggings all day long.
Right.
That's basically where you're at.
Right.
Because they can wear their gym uniform or sweat.
But only black leggings at this point, am I correct?
Only black, not blue.
Black, blue, okay.
But it says black, so is it black, blue, or gray?
Why black?
Why is each color situation with the uniforms a little bit black?
Exactly.
No, it just doesn't make sense. I'm not fighting for me, I'm fighting for the kids and for the parents to make life easy for them. So,
What about the kids who are comfortable in jeans?
You know, let's have a ladies meeting.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah, knock it off.
No worries. But it's a good question. Anyway, so good evening. I'm Melissa Lende. I'm actually a parent here, first year parent of a child in the ABA program. So definitely feel privileged to be part of this school. I'm also privileged to be the vice president of Cpag. So Cpag is Special Education Parents Advocacy Group. So we do try to collaborate with all Saddlebrook school districts just to get a better understanding of our special needs children, as they need attention as well. I do work closely with Monica Maniscalco, who is the president of our group, who does extend her sincere apologies for not being able to be here tonight. Just wanted to touch on a few reminders for our Cpag group. We do meet every third Thursday of the month at 7 p.m. So the link is always sent out by Ms. Garino, who is very amazing. Is also playing a dual role currently. So our Cpag site can be located on the Genesis Parent Portal under the Parent tab. We do try to do weekly updates to our calendar with announcements for webinars, workshops, etc., and a wide array of topics. Our Cpag website is very easy to navigate. We do welcome your attendance to our meetings, and we've had many different topics. Each meeting is very informative, and we will continue to provide information and resources monthly. I'm looking forward to our next meeting, which is March 15th at 7 p.m. So we will be discussing Nurtured Heart Approach, a program that is created by Dr. Howard Glasser. Nurtured Heart is really a tool to create positive ways to react and interact with our children. And it's not only applicable for special needs children, it's applicable in any situation. Basically, we're just here as an extra support for parents who need backup resources. We're parents ourselves of, I'll call it, colorful children. But definitely, we're here to extend resources, our support to those who are attending our meeting. Honestly, we hope to see you at our next meeting. And as always, questions are welcomed. Please feel free to reach out to Monica and myself. I will be providing and updating my contact information on our Cpag website. And enjoy your evening. Thank you for letting me speak.
Quick question.
Yes.
Yes.
Our location is actually on Zoom, so we do hold those meetings via Zoom, and the link is normally sent out, let's say, like a few days before the date of the meeting to remind our parents. Thank you.
I have a question. What about parents who aren't that have special needs?
We want to come. Right, listen, they're more than welcome. We don't label or pass anybody aside. I think when it comes to, as far as the Nurtured Heart program, I would honestly say everybody is welcome to that meeting. Because again, it's teaching ourselves how to really, re-engage our children. I think we all agree, especially with the pandemic, we all lost our patience during those times. So it's really been very challenging, right, getting the kids back into school. I think me being that I do work for Family Support Organization of Bergen County, I've seen a lot of families, whether it be atypical or neurotypical children, as well as special needs. I've seen a lot of children really decline in behaviors. I think there was a lot of difficulty in acclimating them back into school. So it's something definitely as a backup for parents to really work on being more positive and really being more effective and really engaging and not engaging in those behaviors with our children.
So the link now, you're saying through Genesis, I don't think I've ever seen that link in Blackboard or Genesis.
It's on, I know you go through the parent, we have our own, there is a tab for it, but then I know also under the parent tab, there should be Cpag. And what I could do, I can certainly send
I can
out
forward
an
it to
email
everybody.
tomorrow to the board. Not a problem. Yeah, that way, because it is easy navigated, but yes.
I'm sorry, I get the link sent to me directly, so I
Yeah,
can
from Ms.
share with the
Marino.
full board if you want.
Is it on our website?
It's on the under for parents,
Okay.
Cpag, and I'm so close to the 9%.
Yeah, it's right there on the left. There's a link on the page on the.
Right, direct
on the
link.
website.
But if anything, we'll just send it out again, like a direct, how to navigate. It's not a problem. We can certainly do that as well. But I like your idea on the leggings.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there any other comments?
Anybody else wish to have a comment, or Ms. Montalbano, anything? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, what the heck? Yeah. Pull it out.
Hi, Joni Montalbano, 797 Saddle River Road. My daughter is a junior, and we were offered a course to take for SAT that cost $500 and something. They were choosing mornings, afternoons, weekends, I signed her up for it, and now we got an email saying they don't think they have enough signups for it. But this was a course that used to be given in school. Why was that taken away? That's my question. I don't know if it has to do with you don't have somebody that can teach the course, the cost of it, something else took its place, but I feel it was a very important course to get these kids ready for an SAT. That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Montalbano. Carberry. Okay. Closed session. Oh, I'm the wrong one.
So because it's not written black and blue, there's no blue leggings in the uniform. Because they would have to rewrite the whole thing and then do another reading for it, right?
I'll explain more with that.
Okay, that's all, that was.
Nothing.
Okay. I'd like to close the meeting for public comment. All in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Violetti.
With the uniform policy, so you are correct that it had the first reading. And then there was some changeover within the board. We had the elections where new people start. So some of the new people that were on the policy committee wanted to revisit it. So it was pulled at one of our meetings publicly, if you go back and maybe December's meeting. And then the policy committee, January, sorry. And then the policy committee did meet again to discuss, and that's when it was discussed, determined not to include leggings. So that was when that first reading went out. Then when we met again to review policies, because we are meeting every several weeks, then it came up again to keep leggings in, but the goal was to keep it as simple as possible. So, and the reason why we decided to keep the leggings in was because we recognized that we already surveyed the parents, and we already had the input from the parents regarding the leggings. So it was determined to put it back into the policy. It was always black leggings, I believe. I don't think the colors were ever, I think it was always black. Am I wrong with that? But regardless, what we decided, what was decided was to keep it as simple as possible from now until the end of the school year, with the thought that we are planning on revisiting this policy in May or June to have a fresh, it's not a uniform, it's called dressing and grooming, to have a fresh dress and grooming policy for the start of the school year in September. So we are going to revisit it again as a policy committee. So given that, we decided to keep it as simple as possible. We're not changing colors, we're just keeping it as is, just saying that the students are able to wear their PE uniform every day for comfort purposes. That was a big issue. And also to incorporate, we added the leggings. So it does say, that the concern with the leggings, or that the discussion, was that some leggings are see-through, some leggings are thin. So that's why it does say thick black leggings. And I believe the thought behind that was to keep it as appropriate as possible. So that,
To throw away the beige leggings. And the white, the beige. Got it.
and
No
like
blue
I
and
said,
no
so, and the plan is to also to resurvey the parents again when we revisit the policy, but we didn't want to send another survey out about the uniform policy at this time. So we figured that's something to do at the end of the school year, when we're looking at it again to see if any changes need to be made for the start of the school year. SAT prep course, it was a course at the high school. It was done away with. If I recall correctly, the thought behind that was that many districts don't offer it during the school day, and it takes up an elective or another course for our students. So it was determined to offer it as an option for parents. They did find this great place out of Fairlawn. It seemed to be really great. It was offered out to the parents. There was a good number of interested parties, which was great. But then when it came down to meet the payments, I believe we only had 2 payments.
Couldn't make them. We couldn't make them if we're not on my school bus. A number of us emailed the Facebook.
So what we are looking to do, is offering it again. So we went back to the company to offer it for, I believe, maybe the June testing date, but to offer it again, but just to give us some more time to schedule it. But my understanding was that there was 2 parents that paid, which is why we were unable to run it. But I will look into that.
Thank you.
just because I'm a little, the whole SAT prep thing changing because of that. So we no longer have it as a class, that's what you're saying. So we outsourced it, is basically what we did. So then the parents are paying this company to have their kids take this class.
At a discounted rate, because we're hosting it at our school.
But now what you're saying is that there's not enough kids taking it, so they're not running it?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood exactly what you were saying. So now what you just said is they're trying to run it again, you're trying to get them to run it again. So is the same thing gonna happen?
I hope not.
But I guess my problem is then what option do parents have if they try now through time to get SAT credit? You know, like, go out on their own. I'm just saying, 2 times, I'm sorry. Did I say 2 times? I'm just asking. Okay, I'll take it for all, it was twice, sorry.
We're looking right now to do it again, so that they connected with the company said they're willing to run it for the later test.
Okay.
And I will look into school bucks and see if we're able to work through any kinks that may have happened.
And
But that's the first I'm hearing that people couldn't. So I will look into that.
what's the minimum that they will teach it?
I mean, if they say, I believe they say 25 students, but then they say 25, but we'll see 20. And then we reached out to them, they're like, we have 15, like, yeah, so it's a little flexible. No problem.
So it was basically just the payment issue that was everybody was having, pretty much.
I was informed that parents couldn't schedule sports arose, like the spring athletic schedule and other activities, that it turned out not to be a good time for families because it's after school. So that's what I was told. I'll look into it further.
Okay. So now we're going to have a presentation by Mr. Matt Lee from the New Jersey School Boards Association on ethics training.
So for the public, and we're going to keep live streaming. This is an open session training. It's on ethics, so you're welcome to stay. And here it should be about roughly 45 minutes to an hour at the most.
Thank you, Matt. Hey, where you going? You don't want to do this no more?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. The Purple House. See you Wednesday, Mara.
Just 2, but yeah, it's left food. It's better than part of it. Matt.
Thanks so much.
Matt, before you leave, catch up with me real quick before you leave. I think you might have an answer for me or something I need for tomorrow. Oh, congrats.
17 days apart.
Wow.
My daughter's a COVID lady, so.
I'm not eating because of the stress.
Can't hurt. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Happy birthday. Oh, I would have thought 28. Come on. We could have had one big present.
Yeah, I got some if you want.
We're all going to his house afterwards.
Rock and roll?
Sure.
All right, let's go, guys. So many of you have sat through this before, so we'll labor this very much, but I do want to go through all the essentials. And of course, each year we update this with a lot of the cases that have come through the SEC and the advisory opinion. So it does get a little fresh, even though the core is the same. So again, the history of the School Ethics Act, effective April 1992. said that members of both boards of education needed to hold respect and confidence to serve. In addition, it said that these board members and administrators need to avoid conduct in violation of public trust, or conduct which creates a justifiable impression that the public confidence is being violated. And we'll talk more about justifiable impression and what that can mean a little bit later in the presentation. In addition, the Act specified that there should be some standards that board members should have to guide their conduct, and also a disciplinary mechanism. So you can see from your experience with these things that the standards manifested themselves in the Code of Ethics and the disciplinary mechanism in the SEC. Important to point out here that provisions of the Act also apply to charter schools as they accept public money in order to operate their organizations. So in addition to having to maintain ethical standards, and also certainly from a legal perspective, board members have to maintain a certain standard for their conduct, but the monitoring by the state, the New Jersey Cpag monitoring system, is also an important piece of this for board members. One of the 5 areas of Cpag that is monitored is called governance. Governance is the function that you all provide to the district. Governance Indicator 13 in specific talks about the wording that we see in that blue box up there, which is that board members and administrators must file a timely and properly completed personal and relative disclosure statement. Yes.
There's a camera right behind you,
So what should I
you're
do?
looking at the board, so if you want to move up or move back, so see you and us.
Is that okay?
The camera's still on.
All right,
Sorry.
no worries. Also, that the board must annually discuss the School Ethics Act, which we're doing tonight, and you probably did at your reorganization meeting when you reviewed the 10 tenets of the code, and that no member or administrator has been found to be in violation of the School Ethics Act. So 8 Cpag points associated with that. Ms. Violetti, do we, every one of you lose 8 Cpag points? We do not, right? So further incentive for you all to stay on the straight and narrow when it comes to ethics. So School Ethics Act establishes a School Ethics Commission, which we talked about, established conflicts of interest that may exist for board members. Your mandatory training requirements, as you all know, you're required to do mandatory training in your first term and then in the first year of your subsequent term. The Code of Ethics, which we talked about, established 9 years later, based primarily on a code that the NJSBA members adopted for themselves back in the mid-70s. And then finally, the disclosure statements that we talked about already that would highlight any conflicts that you may have. So mandatory training, we talked about this very briefly on the prior slide, but this is the specifics about mandatory training. In each year of your first term, you must take a mandatory training course, very creatively called Governance 1, 2, and 3. Governance 1 is about skills and knowledge necessary to serve. It also touches upon the 5 areas of CUSAC, HIB implications for board members, and finally, the Chief School Administrator evaluation process that is specified by code to take place within the first 6 months of taking office. Governance 2 and 3 are about school finance and labor relations, and then student achievement, respectively. And then finally, on Governance 4, within 1 year of each new 3-year term you're elected to, you must take Governance 4. And that is essentially a legal update. Questions on mandatory training?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So I was appointed, so I didn't get reelected per se, I was appointed.
Yep.
For May. So would I have to do Governance 4 then? Or-
Did you get through 1, 2, and 3 already?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
You have to take it.
And I already took 1 when I was appointed the last time. Do I have to take it again? I have to start over?
No,
I go over.
your separation was like a year, right? 2 years?
No, it was more than that.
How long?
2, maybe a year and a half, 18 months.
Yeah. You want to take that over?
I don't.
No.
So I go right to 2.
Yep.
Good to know.
What would I do? I was out for a year, And then I came back on, but I did all of them at one time.
You have to take them all.
Do I?
No, I'm kidding.
I did the easy one first then. Do I just,
What was you were gone a year, right?
yep,
Yeah, so you just pick up your regular schedule. So wherever you needed to be next, that's what you would go to?
Four. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. School Ethics Commission, 9-member board appointed by the governor. Each person serves a 3-year term, maximum of 5 from any one political party. Composition is always 5 non-school officials, 2 school board members, and 2 administrators. In my experience, rarely been fully staffed, and that can be a problem. So we'll talk about that going forward. What does the SEC do? 2 basic kinds of output. First, advisory opinions. These are opinions requested by the SEC by a school official that talks about proposed conduct or activity and whether or not that may be a violation of the act or code. And we see in that yellow bar there that these can be made public. However, they need 6 votes from the SEC in order to do that. So if the SEC is not fully staffed and it has fallen below 6 total members in the past, then of course nothing can be made public. And the benefit, of course, would be if it were made public, it would provide guidance to the rest of the state. And if you recall back with the last time that they were under 6 members, a whole bunch sort of kind of backlogged, and then they were all released at one time. And that sent everybody scrambling to try and figure out how to comply to that. So again, important that they stay staffed to the greatest degree possible. The other kind of output is rulings on ethics complaints. These are complaints that may be filed by anyone as opposed to an advisory opinion, which can only be a school official. So a member of the public, board member against board member, administrator against board member, etc. These allege some kind of a violation of the School Ethics Act or the code took place. And as of the next slide, what happens if you do get found to have violated the act? The SEC recommends a penalty to the commissioner. The commissioner imposes the penalty. Starting with the left-hand side of the slide, we have the least serious, moving over to the right hand, which is the most serious. A reprimand, again, the least serious, is essentially an official rebuke by the commissioner. You would receive a letter that tells you you've been found to be in violation. Then you obviously would take that as a clue to not continue with that kind of behavior. Moving up in severity, the next box is a censure. That is a formal disapproval by the commissioner. It is also publicized by the adoption of a resolution. So you may read into that is a public reprimand. And of course, the next 2 are fairly self-explanatory. A suspension would be removal from your duties for a specific amount of time. That is recommended by the SEC and finally decided on by the commissioner. Once again, a formal resolution is passed here. So that, of course, is again very public. And then finally, removal. That would be removal from office for the remaining length of your term. Any questions on any of that? Okay, perfect. So this is where we kind of recap some of the activity by the SEC in 2021. And I'll be honest with you, some of that was released after we put this presentation together back in December. So some of these things came out over the last 4 weeks or so. So with this being kind of a scorecard, we'll just walk through the 4 different columns one at a time. In terms of advisory opinions, there were 20 opinions requested, 9 of which were recently made public, and we're kind of wading through those with our legal team to, again, put some concrete examples in the presentation. So if you're following school board notes where we publish those advisory opinion summaries, that's a good way to keep in touch with the latest advice from those. When it comes to mandatory training violations, 30 cases considered in 2021, 7 members removed, 5 members suspended for 30 days each, 18 members reprimanded.
As to disclosure statements, here we have 3 removals for failure to file your disclosure statements, 3 censures, 1 reprimand, and then school ethics violations, 29 cases presented, 21 dismissed, 2 settlements, and 6 cases recommended to the commissioner, which we'll talk about going forward.
I have a question. We're all volunteers and we get elected. Why do we have to supply a disclosure statement of our annual income?
And your spouse. Because it's the
And your
law.
spouse. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious that you have authority as a state official within the district, and if you have sources of income that may be in conflict with your duties as a state official, it should be known publicly that you may have to step away from certain issues because of that.
Well, that would be more where you work, not how much you make.
Yeah,
Well, it
it's,
depends on who you're lobbying with, so you know.
no, but that's a matter of point. It's just, it asks you for a flat figure. It doesn't ask you where you get it from.
No, it doesn't ask you for a flat figure. It asks you where you get it from.
It asks you what your annual income is.
No,
Who's your employer?
it says,
On
who
the
did you
disclosure
derive,
form I get.
it says, who did you derive income from in excess of $2,000? You have to list every entity from which you derived income over a certain level, but you don't have to say how much you derive.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever put how much I earn. I just have to see where my money's, any public official has to do that, right?
I don't know about, maybe the attorney can speak to that. Do council members have to do the same?
Yeah, I'm not certain. I mean, you know about, for example, politicians who put assets in blind trusts and things of that sort for the very reason you're talking about. And
Yeah.
if you have a source of income, you could be influenced by that potentially. So it's with the government to have it be disclosed.
Makes sense.
Other questions? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, public advisory opinion A01-21, one of the 8 public advisory opinions in 2021. Again, very high level details around this case. I'm sure our esteemed attorney could testify that a lot of these cases run many, many, many pages and have many, many details. But we, for the purposes of presentation, just want to pick out the most germane to the discussion. So a board member owns and operates an accounting firm that was started after being elected to the board. At least one district employee is a client of the firm with potential to provide accounting services to other employees and/or families. Board member and the company financially benefit from the professional services provided. In this case, the SEC advised that the board member's continued provision of accounting services in the district creates a justifiable impression. Remember that term that we talked about prior, right? That the public trust is being violated. So everything may be totally above board in the accounting practices that are being applied there. But the fact that the public can look at that and say, oh, I see the connection there, and is there really everything going on above board there, is enough for the SEC to say, you really need to cease those kinds of activities for the sake of the board's standing and reputation. They judged that it was reasonable for the public to perceive, even if not actually occurring, that the board member is using the position to obtain a financial benefit, and the board member needed to recuse himself from any matter involving the district employees for whom the business is or has provided services. So again, that concept of justifiable impression, even though stuff may be totally above board, the look, if you will, is important. I'm going to ask you guys to jump in here as we do in the past and just read a piece of the code for me, and we'll just go around the table, and we'll start with Gina if she's standing up.
Okay,
Thank you.
start. I will uphold and enforce all laws, rules, regulations of the State Board of Education and court orders pertaining to schools. Desired changes shall be brought about only through legal and ethical procedures.
So yeah, again, one of those things where you understand your role as a state official within the district. And of course, the things that the state puts down that schools have to comply with must be upheld by you as board members. We just lost one of those today, right? Everybody had to wear masks because the state required you to wear masks. And you as a board really didn't have any choice about that. You had to comply with that. So again, And then I just want to point out at the bottom of the slide, the standards are written for each of those pieces of the code. And that is kind of the language that you're going to bump up against if the SEC is considering whether or not it's a violation of that piece of the code. Vicki, have you do the next one?
I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children regardless of their ability, race, creed, sex, or social standing.
So there's as many motivations to run for the board as there are different individuals on the board. Many people come here, of course, with an interest in their own children's education. Some of them are promoted to run for the board by civic organizations or athletic organizations. But this piece of the code reminds you that once you become seated as a board member, the scope of your interest has to extend to all children in the district, regardless of any distinguishing characteristics. C. Mark, yeah.
I will confine my board action to policy making, planning, and appraisal. I will help to frame policies and plan only after the board has consulted those who will be affected by them.
Great piece of the code, because what does it do? It tells you what your job is, right? Our job is policy making, it is planning, and it is appraisal, right? And it also reminds you that you have a duty to communicate with the public and to the staff and to the entire educational community about the policies that you're planning. They can't be done in a vacuum. They have to be done with the knowledge that they are going to affect the way a district is run and the way those folks' lives are framed. Oops, sorry. D, Sylvia.
I will carry out my responsibility not to administer the schools, but together with my fellow board members to see that they are well run.
So two key things here, right? We just found out in the prior piece what our job was. Now we're finding out what our job isn't. Our job is not to manage the schools day to day. And it also reinforces a point that board members individually really have no authority. You need to work together with the rest of the board members to exercise the oversight responsibilities over the district. Mike?
I will recognize that the authority rests with the Board of Education and will make no personal promises nor take any private action that may compromise the board.
Once again, authority rests with the board itself. Board members individually don't have any ability to make any personal promises to try to get things done within the district on their own. And then this last piece about private action that may compromise the board. Anybody think of an area that might get you in real quick trouble there? Private action that may compromise the board? Anybody ever heard of social media? Oh.
No, not us.
No, geez. Hey.
There's a lot of things you can do there, but social media is just waiting there to trip you up. So we'll talk more about that going forward. F.
I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends.
So we talked before about there were a number of different things that might bring you to the board. Some of them might even be partisan political things. Some of them might be, organizations as we referred to before. But you are not supposed to carry the flag for those folks when you're performing your board duties. You're supposed to keep independent judgment and keep at the core of what your activities are, the advancement of student achievement within the district. G.
I will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools. In all other matters, I will provide accurate information and in concert with my fellow board members, interpret to the staff the aspirations of the community for its school.
Great. So everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with the concept of executive session, right? Executive session allows you to talk about matters that normally would happen in the public, right? Because all of the work that a board does is part of a public meeting, which is open to the public. But there are certain exceptions. There are 9 specific exceptions to the Open Public Meetings Act that allow you to talk about things in executive session because talking about those in public would pose some kind of a risk to people's privacy or you know, needlessly expose them to scrutiny or potentially compromise the district's ability to negotiate from a, you know, solid position with, whether it be with labor unions or with vendors. So you're reminded here that you need to keep those matters confidential. You can only discuss them with other sworn members of the board, your administrators, or your board attorney. And this includes everyone, including your spouse and your dog and anybody else you might want to talk to.
Can't talk to my dog.
Can't talk to them. Okay. H. Yeah, so
On the last one.
Yep.
Right. It's said that we're allowed to speak with fellow board members. So just, for an example, we have an issue tonight, and if I wanted to call Vinny tomorrow and speak to him, that would be okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like there's more to that story.
No. We used to do it, then we were told we can't. Now it's like confusing, so I just want to clarify, if I choose to call Vicky and discuss something that she is a board member, I'm not violating anything. That's all I want to know.
Well, your board attorney is here. What would your advice be?
No, so it wouldn't necessarily, as you were, I think, implied in your response, I think there's more there. And as frequently stated in the ethics opinions, when it's been presented, it's not a per se violation of the Ethics Act. However, the board members need to always be aware of all the responsibilities and obligations under the Ethics Act and the Code of Conduct. So yes, it's not a violation per se to have a conversation. But then things could possibly happen in the course of that conversation. Eventually, but you have to be mindful of the whole, as the Supreme Court decision said, on the whole code, all the code, and all your responsibilities when you have those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question along the same lines.
Yeah.
So if you have a committee meeting.
Yeah.
With certain, the members of the board on that committee.
Yep.
And let's say another board member connects with you and wants to ask questions about what happened during that committee meeting. Is that confidential information or can that be shared with the entire board, even if they're not part of the committee?
All right, let me just back up a second. So you have a committee meeting, somebody who's not part of the committee meeting calls you and says, what happened at the meeting?
Right.
And you as the superintendent?
Right.
Or just any board?
Any superintendent or board member.
Okay. So I'm going to fall back on that per se piece. Again, I don't think that's a per se violation, but if the intent of that is to circumvent open public meetings by trying to build consensus piecemeal, that could be a problem.
Wait, say that again? I want to elaborate on that a little bit, because I kind of know where Tony's coming from, so I think, because I want to make sure we completely understand. If there's something that was explained in a committee meeting, maybe an outside person came in to discuss in that committee, how does that information now get passed down to the other board members if they can't tell us what was said in that meeting? And how do I, wait, now I'm trying not to get specific, because now how do I vote on that? Do you understand? Like, because now it's gonna come to the meeting and I have to vote on that policy or that whatever, and maybe I'm not part of that committee. So now how do I vote if I don't know everything?
Just remember that the foundation here is that you're supposed to have these conversations in public.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. No, that was what I was asking you. So, okay.
Right, so the way you learn about committee work is you show up to a workshop or board meeting
Right.
and you get a report from the committee chair. Right, so that's how you learn about those things, and you can ask questions.
So then the questions get asked up here.
Yeah, the default isn't, I'm having a sideline conversation, the default is. I'm
Not
having a
sharing it with the
conversation.
public.
To that point, we have different committees that certain people are on different committees.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna use my committee because it's negotiations, that's a different story. But let's say building and grounds. Now, we do get a committee report.
Yeah.
Now, when we come to, say, our work session, in the public portion of it, we're allowed to say what is in that report, to discuss it amongst us?
Sure.
Okay.
So that's not confidential at all? The community is not allowed to hear?
And only if it's not personnel.
Is
Only if it's
one of the
personnel.
nine exceptions to the Open Public Meetings Act, is a content, something that should be held in exec. Because in that case, we shouldn't be talking about a public discussion.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sort of. I need examples.
It does make
Well,
sense,
today,
I just
I was
don't.
confused.
Yep, okay.
Okay, it's a perfect example. I didn't know about any of this uniform change. I read it, we brought it to the table. This is where I have the time to discuss it amongst everyone, to say my questions or my input or whatever. If I don't agree with it, then Wednesday meeting,
Okay.
I do what I feel it's in the best interest of, the students, or work something out somehow.
Okay, thank you though. But I feel like I was part of a meeting that shouldn't be discussed. Huh? Now it's like, what do you mean? I know she's like, what are you talking about?
I'm confused with everything.
The only time we shouldn't be discussing something is if it was enclosed,
Coffee.
or outside of the meeting. It's a
Well,
closed session.
let's not talk about the environment you talked about it in. Let's talk about bumping
If-
it up against the nine.
The nine,
exceptions
if
to
it's
the
the
Open Public Meetings Act.
exceptions, right, then we shouldn't talk about that stuff. But-
Correct.
But if they have a committee meeting, they can come to open and talk about that committee, what was talked in that meeting.
Of course.
To
But-
us, to the rest of us.
But you have to understand what is being seen by the public, right? So typically, what you would talk about in a committee report is, we talked about, I'm gonna make something up, we talked about the artificial turf on the field, right? And some of us thought it should be blue, and some of us thought it should be red, and some of us thought it should be green, right? In that conversation, somebody might have said, well, I think it should be polka dot, right? And that's just absurd, right? You're never gonna do that.
Right.
Does that really need to be reported out in public?
Okay.
No, not really,
Okay.
right? You're not going anywhere with it. It was, something that was just kind of brought up. It's not germane how you move forward.
Right,
So do you really have to talk about it in public?
but it's up to that committee not to bring it up in the work session then.
Well, I mean, I don't,
I know you're talking about something crazy like a polka dot field, but I
Yeah.
mean, it would be under the discretion of that committee then to share that information with the rest of the board.
I think what you're looking for in a committee report is recommendations to move forward on something, right? It's not necessary for a committee report to talk about every nuance that was discussed,
Okay.
right?
But don't we get that on Wednesday, the committee reports?
No, we tried it, we've been trying to get it before, no.
Okay, using
They've
your
been
example,
Yeah.
okay, the Building and Grounds Committee talked about turfing the field.
Yeah.
Now we get the report, and in the report, it says during the course of their meeting, they discussed colors of the turf field.
Yep.
We get it, now are we, as other board members who are not part of that committee,
Yep.
allowed to come to the meeting and say, well, what colors were chosen or what was decided?
Sure.
Since it was in that report?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, now I have a question. So, like on the budget
This
committee.
is a tough one for us.
Yeah, I think that's the only one that confuses me, like the budget one. So when when the budget committee is discussing it, and they're discussing different elements of putting together the budget, is that conversation what's going on, and that's supposed to be out in public before it's been ironed out?
It depends on what the content is, right?
Okay.
So let's take, for example, let's just say a small district, right? And a small district was deciding, we're not gonna offer basket weaving anymore, right? Well, in that case, basket weaving probably equates to a faculty member, right? Easily identifiable faculty member, right? So would you talk about that in public necessarily? No, right? That's gonna affect somebody's job.
Okay, so
That's a
now,
really basic example of how you would try to
but that's what I needed.
manage that.
Okay, but now the members who are not part of that committee would never know about that without a committee report.
Well, you might talk about it because it's going to affect personnel in executive session. of the
Includes,
entire
okay,
board.
got it. No, I'm done. I'm
Did
good.
did you have something to add, sir?
I saw Kate.
Me, I do not.
It's just, this is like,
for me at least, some of these things are a little more difficult to see where that line is, where the correct, you know.
Just because we were told in the past we weren't allowed to, so I want to clarify. That's all.
Well, again, Sylvia, you have to be kind of careful about where you take these conversations.
I
right?
understand that.
Just the turfing field and the color or whatever.
Yeah.
Like the full board has to vote on it. So what if we want to discuss, like, well, I really think it should be blue, but you guys think it should be red, and having that discussion in public is
administration
sometimes
thinks.
difficult because
Could be longer, we are.
like we come to a decision eventually, but then you've got people who are gonna be like, well, half the board wanted it to be red, and half the board wanted it to be blue, and then they finally decided on green. So I think it's hard having some of those kinds of discussions in public because then the public sees us as like, they're so divided, half of them want this, half of them want that, and then we come up with another decision. So I think it's hard discussing those decisions, you know, so that the public perception isn't that we're so divided, but then when we finally come to a decision, well, yeah, maybe we had different opinions, but now we're at a decision.
Right.
You know, so, and that's the decision we're presenting.
Right.
Sometimes that discussion gets taken the wrong way.
I would
Does that make sense?
I would suggest to you that the tone and tenor of the discussion probably has more to do with that than the fact that you have different opinions.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yeah.
Watch your tone, is what he's trying to do.
Make sense?
What's the purpose of this?
Mind you,
Disclosing what your objective is.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I just want them for loud. I don't know.
That's it.
Okay, let's forge on. Okay, H, where do we go?
I will vote to appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the chief administrative officer.
So you all know that the person responsible for personnel in your district is the superintendent, right? So the superintendent is going to bring you recommendations for hire. You should be looking at those recommendations in the context of your role in the district, right? What's your role? Going all the way back to tenant C, what's your role, right? Policy, planning, appraisal, right? So you look at a personnel recommendation and you vote yes on that. Are you voting yes because you sat in on the interviews and you checked their credentials and you called their references? No, right? That's not your job, right? You have a job around policy, right? So do you have all the policies in place that allow you to employ people? Yeah, right? Do you have a planning responsibility? Yes, of course you do, right? So if you look at a personnel recommendation and you go, oh, yeah, we're hiring a new physics teacher, and that's because we have a program that needs us to have a physics teacher, right? And that's something that we want to see move forward in the district as part of our overall educational plan. Yes, that's a yes for me on the planning side. And then also on the financial side, right? We budgeted for this new physics teacher, and if I vote yes, we have already done all the planning that we need to have in place, and that's why you're getting my yes vote, right? Look at that personnel appointment from the perspective of what your role is, not that you acted as a personnel person in this recommendation and vote. Does that all make sense? Yeah? Okay.
I will support and protect school personnel and proper performances of their duties.
This is actually pretty simple, and if you look at the standards, it's really kind of clear, right? If a board member does something that results in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming somebody who's doing their job correctly, that's an ethical problem for a board member. And the last one, J, all the way back to you, Gina.
I will refer all complaints to the chief administrative officer and will act on the complaints at public meetings only after failure of an administrative solution.
So
Oh, I get it.
we're all familiar with the principle of chain of command, right? So this speaks to chain of command. Board members do not belong inserting themselves into trying to solve problems for the public, right? That's not your job. That's the administrative side of the district. Eventually, if something proceeds up the chain of command, gets to the superintendent's desk, and it is not resolved satisfactorily, it could come to you as a board member. So if you become involved in that prior to it coming to you as a final resolution, you would prejudice yourself in a way. You compromise your ability to render an impartial decision when you do have to act on it. So a complaint comes to you as a board member, you can listen politely, express sympathy, and then refer that person to the chain of command. Most always, it makes sense to refer them directly to the place where the issue took place, whether it be a classroom or an athletic field or a club or whatever it might have been, but then allow that to move up the reporting lines to try for a resolution. And again, you only need to act on that once it comes to you, if the chain hasn't resulted in something satisfactory.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So I think many times the community reaches out an immediate email to all board members, sometimes administration, about their displeasure at something.
Sure.
How, as the board, do we respond? Should we, I would assume we should not respond. So we're not going to respond to a parent who's reached out to us and at least redirect them?
Yeah, you can redirect them. Sure.
Okay. So who is that? Whose job?
Super.
If they email the whole board,
Yep.
should it be the board president? Should be another member that should email back and say like, I'm sorry, have you forward? Like, because then I feel like we're engaging in dialogue.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that unless I engage in that dialogue, I'm assuming that you haven't reached someone else, or am I assuming that you have reached an administrator? You see what, like.
Okay, the answer to your first question is, what does your bylaw say? Right? Because
We are not allowed to.
you designate somebody as a spokesperson for your board, typically it's your board president.
Correct.
Right.
I believe that's what.
So if somebody's going to speak for the board, it's going to be the board president, unless he or she designates someone else. Right? So that's the first part, is no, you don't speak for the board, right? The other part is the public doesn't understand that you don't solve problems. That's not your job, right? This structure, if you will, doesn't really happen in very many other places unless you're like, you know, working on a corporate board or something like that, and you kind of get what a board of directors is about. So they see you get elected to the board, they voted for you, you're their guy, you're their gal, whatever it might be, and now I got somebody who can help me solve problems. Well, you should quickly learn through your mandatory training that that's not your job, right? So again, like I said before, okay to say, oh, geez, I'm sorry, you're having that problem. I think the best thing for you to do is to go back to the teacher, the coach, the advisor, whatever it might be, and see if you can figure out a better solution than you're currently stuck with. And then if not, you can move up to that person's supervisor and that person's supervisor, right? So refer to the chain of command, and then let your superintendent know if she's not already aware that there's an issue that's kind of bubbling up and it may end up on their desk. Right?
Okay, so if the whole board is emailed, then it should be the board president who tells them to go back to the chain of command. The rest of us should not respond.
Nope. You should be speaking with one voice, right? That's the best way to ensure a consistent and informed voice that is speaking for you, right? Your board president is typically going to be in touch with everything that's going on in the district, right? So if it's been your habit to individually reply, I would move away from that.
Even if it's just a simple thank you for your email, well,
There's nothing wrong with being polite, right?
that's,
Of course. But you don't want to start to use language that's going to suggest that you're representing a position of the board.
oh, absolutely. But just to acknowledge the email and say thank you, it'll either be forwarded or taken under advisement, whatever.
What I would do, to be honest with you, is I would put that statement wherever you have a link to the board email box and say, because 99% of the things that are going to come to you from the public are things that aren't appropriate for the board to act on. right?
Mhm.
So, and a member of the administration will return your message if appropriate. That's it, right? They don't expect you to respond. You've already told them you're not going to.
So in the past, we were told not to respond, and then we would get remarks, the board members don't even respond, they're rude, disrespectful. So therefore, I think just acknowledging that we received your email and we will pass it on to the president, like everybody should have like the same response.
We should just come up with a response.
Same response so that we're all on the same page, and if you, so this way you don't feel as though you're just ignoring them, because that's how they feel on that end. Because I know Mike will respond, but if they're responding to all of us, and, we just feel sometimes that we need to say, thank you. Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more you can just speak with one voice, the better off you are.
Okay. Still not ignoring.
How is it that you get contacted? Do you have individual emails on the?
Yes.
website? Well, it might be wise to put an auto reply on there to say, thank you for your.
That's a good idea.
Or it might be wise, like I said, to put a note on the same page where all your emails are. Yeah. Correspondence will be copied to the superintendent for action, if necessary or if appropriate. Okay. So SEC commissioner decisions, once again, these are very high level synopses of what happened within these cases. Like we have in the past, just looking for you guys to let me know what you think, what pieces of the code or act were violated, and what do you think the penalty might have been here? So a
Nothing.
board member distributed paper flyers urging voters to vote for a particular political party, indicating that complainant was the leader of a radical group who was going to take over town government. The board member used the title as a board member and had no disclaimer.
I think removal.
Removal. It's a high bar, Sylvia.
And it never happens, but that's okay.
It does happen, it does happen. Not frequent, but it does. Anybody else?
I would say a reprimand.
Doing a reprimand.
No, he's on this one.
Anybody else?
We're on the part, the flyer one, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just making sure I'm on the right thing.
Reprimand. Okay, we got two extremes here. All right, here we go. So this was a violation of E, make no personal promises or take any private action that may compromise the board, right? This is a classic example of private action. And it certainly doesn't reflect well on the board. F, surrender one's political judgment to a special interest or partisan political group. Again, particular political parties' flyers. And not providing accurate information. Right? Penalty there essentially.
I also think it depends on the climate of society and who's the radical group. So at one point, I think if you were against a particular group, and if it's a hot topic, the voting would be different.
You think?
I do. I think social climate makes weighs quite a bit on these type of decisions.
I think the crux of this case was that this person was not at all a member of a radical group and just had sort of an ethnic affiliation.
You know what?
An ethnic affiliation. So, obviously a huge leap was taken.
Whoops.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and anything you want to add? No? Perfect. Okay, a board member at a public
Nope,
meeting
let's get-
threatened a coach's job and had done so in the previous year as well.
Well, if you did it in the previous years, obviously, it was a reprimand.
You think?
Is he still there
Anybody
to
else?
do it again?
I would say a
That's true.
reprimand.
Reprimand as well?
Yeah.
Okay, no consideration given that this was a repeat offense.
Yeah.
Or
It has to be
repeat.
more than that. It has to be more than a reprimand.
Maybe suspension.
He probably was already reprimanded for doing it the first time, right?
I couldn't say that for sure.
There could be a suspension looming.
You think? Suspension? All right, here we go. Boom. Mike was right.
Oh, how you doing?
And once again, violation of I of the code, failure to support school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Next case, board member voted to approve the superintendent's merit goals. The member's daughter was a tenured teacher in the district at the time the member participated in the vote. What do we think here in terms of penalty?
You would have to say a censor.
Censure? Reprimand? All right, here we go.
Naughty, naughty.
Boom, I reprimand. One of the things I found interesting in this case was this woman knew that she couldn't participate in personnel matters and couldn't participate in voting on the contract of the superintendent, but thought that the merit goals were different, or at least asserted that they were different, and obviously not the case. So any terms of employment related to the superintendent would be a problem.
Why was she allowed to vote?
Yeah, why didn't they stop her right there?
I couldn't tell you how that worked out on the board table. But again, she did have some knowledge that there was a conflict there. And that she should have stayed away from at least parts of it, but she should have stayed away from all of it. All right, board member voted to approve the use of district facilities to an organization from which he derives income. Censure. Reprimand. Okay. Boom, reprimand. Last two. Board member wrote an op-ed endorsing a candidate for the Board of Education and included a disclaimer. The op-ed included multiple references to his position on the board and a discussion and comments on board matters.
Oh, boy.
Well, you use a disclaimer, right?
Yeah, so you would,
I'm gonna say reprimand.
Yeah.
I'm going to say nothing.
What was that?
We just blew it out.
Fat finger error. Any other guesses?
Say you used a disclaimer, so there's not really much you can do, right?
Oh. Here's the problem. If you use a disclaimer, but the content of your writing or speech is such that it's not convincing that you are only speaking for yourself, or that the content of your remarks is what we'll see later is a phrase called derogates from the mission of the board, then you have a problem despite the fact that you may have used a disclaimer. So if you use the disclaimer, but you act in the opposite direction, that's a problem. Okay? Last one, a board member on his personal Facebook page made anti-Muslim, racist, and incendiary and offensive comments. Ego removal. Sylvia, what do you
I
think?
don't think it's removable.
Okay, well, let's see. Make no personal promises or take private action to make compromise. Board, you see private action to make compromise.
It's
Board
not,
again.
it's not a board page, it's his personal page.
No, this happened in Elmwood Park last year, or a year ago. It was all over the newspaper. And he resigned because they couldn't remove him, but he resigned because they tormented him out.
This case, I believe, was from like Monmouth County, if I'm not mistaken.
No, but I'm just saying, that's why I knew it
There was
wasn't.
another, there was quite a few cases, weren't there? With
Yeah,
something
they-
on social media
Yeah,
that's.
several of these, yep. In this case, I believe this person had already resigned, which is the only reason that he was essentially not suspended or removed. Okay, so when it comes to the social media disclaimer, the SEC has recommended some language that is not, you don't have to use mandatory, or excuse me, word for word, but whatever disclaimer you use should hit these points, really, that you're speaking as a private citizen, even though you have you're holding office as a board member, that they're not representative of the board or any of the members of the board, and solely represent your own personal opinions. The SEC did say, though, that if you use the disclaimer, the substance of the post can render it meaningless. So we talked about before that the substance of the writing and the way you represent yourself can essentially negate what it is you tried to cover with the disclaimer.
Now, is that only pertaining to school-related issues?
Not necessarily. So we talked about that piece with the racist comments, right? So basically, they were talking about a person who wasn't necessarily involved in the schools, but still, right? In this case, and this is what I referred to before when we talked about language that derogates from the mission of the board. This was a case that involved remarks made over a period of several years, including time before this person was on the board. And charges were filed, and eventually the SEC, because of the timing of their comments and because I think one of the pieces of the filing was beyond the 180-day limit, no penalty was assessed, no violation found. But they did go on to say that the words that are used by board members when communicating in public can have a detrimental effect on the standing of the board in the public's eye. So you do want to make sure that the language you use is consistent with not just your legal rights, First Amendment rights, but also with your ethical obligations as a board member. We talked about this already, so I'm going to skip over this slide. So, board resolution to approve the hiring of the auditing firm that you work for. Can you participate in the vote? No, you cannot, right? Conflicts of interest are of the nature that we have there on the slide, usually some kind of business or financial or some other kind of benefit that might be derived, whether it be gifts or some kind of service or employment. Board members who have some kind of a conflict relative to them or their immediate family, no discussion or no vote in those issues. Here we see that the SEC definition of immediate family is used when we look at the bottom here. Spouse or dependent child residing in the same household. Sometimes the SEC uses different standards, and we'll talk about that in the next slide or two. So here, when we talk about relative, back when the accountability regs were passed, the breadth of relationships that could pose a problem to board members became quite expansive. And you can see that all of these different categories, so spouse, parent, step-parent, child, stepchild, grandparent, et cetera, whether related to the school official or their spouse or partner by blood, marriage, or adoption, can present a problem to you as a board member when it comes to participating in certain issues. So we recommend, of course, that you guys take periodic evaluation of what relationship might be a problem for you as a board member, and then consult with your board attorney to make sure that activities you may want to participate in are okay based on those relationships. So district has an opening for an LDTC. It would be a perfect job for your nephew who lives 2 towns away. Can the district hire your nephew?
Nope.
No.
Right.
Unless you resign.
Well, that's a different story, isn't it? Mostly no, right? We'll talk about that in a second. The board is meeting to discuss the superintendent's performance evaluation. Your daughter is a substitute in the district. Can you participate? Go ahead, Sylvia. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have nothing to say on this.
All right. So let's talk about those two things. First, you can't hire the relative of a board member or the CSA. We have a note there. There may be exceptions. And I think I've talked about this with you guys before. If it happens to be a really difficult personnel search, maybe a very rare teaching discipline like gauging Greek or something, you may be able to conduct the search, not come up with any qualified candidates except somebody who happens to be a relative, present that case to the ECS, and you may get permission to hire that person. My understanding is that's not given out very frequently. If you have a relative who already works in the district, a CSA can't exercise direct or indirect authority over that relative, right? A board member who has a relative in the district can't take part in employment matters concerning the CSA or supervises in the chain of command between the relative and the CSA. And then also, if there were a CSA search going on, board members could not take part in any facet of that search, whether it was something as simple as creating the ad or interviewing search firms, no involvement whatsoever. Now, I want to go back to this substitute piece, right? I've seen different opinions, and I saw it here once, that if the substitutes come into the district through a service rather than being employed directly for by the district, that this may not present a problem. So I think I will ask you for your humble opinion in this area.
That's correct. Yes, again, all other things being equal, unless there's something else, like you were involved in something involving that superintendent that could create an appearance of impropriety, but just if there's no other facts, correct.
Great. Okay, thank you.
So if they come through a service, you can participate, is what you're saying?
As long as your board attorney says it's good.
Answer's no.
However,
Yes.
that pertains to whether they directly work for their school. What if it's we, I'm not gonna say our district, we outsource our subs?
Well, that's what we're saying. If they
So
work for a
then it
service.
doesn't matter.
Right.
If they work for another company.
Okay. So the board is voting to approve the memorandum of agreement with the local education association. You are a teacher in another district. Can you participate in the vote?
Nope.
So here's our handy collective bargaining chart based on an advisory opinion from 2017. Read the chart like this. Column 1 is relationship to a board member. Column 2 is whether the current member of a statewide public teachers union. Column 3, can you participate in negotiations, yes or no? Column 4, can you vote to ratify the contract, yes or no? So a spouse, dependent child, child who's not a dependent or relative who works in the district, no, right? If you, your spouse, or dependent child works out of district, is in the union, you may not participate in negotiations, but once everything is signed, sealed, and delivered, you can vote to ratify the contract, and be briefed, I should say, and then vote to ratify the contract, absent another conflict. The last row, child who's not a dependent or a relative who works out of district, you may participate in negotiations, you may vote to ratify the contract. Again, absent another conflict. What does another conflict look like? Well, typically this is the one that would be most common. That is an immediate family member or relative in question has heightened union involvement, meaning they are a negotiations team, they are a building rep, they are an officer in the local. In that case, consult your board attorney to make sure that that relationship doesn't pose a problem for you when it comes to voting on a contract. Another fairly recent advisory opinion from 2018 said endorsement of a candidate by a local or statewide union does not create a per se conflict unless a financial contribution is given and is intended to influence the member. In prior years, the advice was if you were endorsed by the local, gift or not, you should refrain from negotiations for your first year on the board. So that got a little bit more lax. Doctrine of necessity, does that come into play here at all?
Oh, it did a lot.
It did, yeah.
We used to have 9 or 8 conflicted board members.
Wow. Yeah, so you guys are familiar with this, you know that you have to publicly state what your conflicts are, and then I think you post it. What are the regulations? You post it publicly for 30 days, I think?
Correct. You have a resolution, you give notice that you're going to so vote, and so on the board website.
And then everybody can participate in discussion.
And everybody discloses their conflicts, and everybody can participate.
Yep. Okay, volunteerism. Members are not banned from
Bless you.
volunteering in district schools, bless you, but there are important considerations to make. You can volunteer for activities with outside organizations like your PTA, your booster club, et cetera, as long as they don't fall underneath the, official umbrella of the district. I learned fairly recently that some PTAs actually do get sponsored by the district. You can even hold an officer's position in those organizations, but you should be careful if issues affecting those organizations come before the board. You likely want to be cautious about discussion and or voting. You may want to recuse yourself to start with. When it comes to volunteering, you need to be conscious of whether you're going to have some kind of control, or they call it executive authority, over students, staff, or money. If you do, then you probably should not be volunteering in that area. And if you are going to be in the schools for a volunteer activity, you should let your superintendent know, perform that volunteer activity, and then leave the building. It is not an opportunity to check up on things, right? This is kind of a checklist that we developed relative to volunteering. If you can answer these questions the same as we do in green, then you are probably okay. If your answers deviate, you should have a conversation with your board attorney to make sure that these activities are okay for you as a board member. You can see that some of the things that really present a problem are frequency of being in the schools, right? The SEC called it enmeshed in the building. If you're there so much that somebody might mistake you for a staff member, you're there way too much, right? Or if you're handling district money or giving orders to or from staff, giving orders or taking orders from staff. So those things can be a problem for board members. Interview committees, AO4-12 said that 1 or 2 board members with the administrative staff coordinating could participate in interviews if the superintendent invited them into the process. Their activity would be limited to observations and assessments. The CSA has the sole ability to recommend someone for hire. In A31-15, the board member involvement in interviews for positions other than that of the superintendent is not encouraged. So you can see 3 years later, they got even more narrow in the scope of a board member's involvement in this process. But they did say that if, for whatever circumstance, the superintendent did bring you into that process, you need to follow the guidelines in AO4-12. A15-10 said exit interviews were too much involvement in the day-to-day management of the district, and they're no good for board members. Talked about before developing a list of conflicts, so do revisit that regularly. Your board attorney should be your final word on whether or not you have issues with ethics, so do consult with your board attorney if you have questions about that. And I mentioned before, check the school board notes to keep up on advisory opinions as they're released. Closing piece from advisory opinion, which I will not read. And these are the links to the cases that we have in the presentation. If you want to look at it. Okay, guys, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Matthew.
Going back to the volunteer, I was asked to help on a trip tray that my grandson in school is having. Are you recommending I don't?
So I was asked the same thing for Little School. They asked me to help.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Oh, I got a good question for you. Wait till you hear this one.
Direction. We're giving direction. Yes, it's just superficial side, volunteer, show your support.
No. We can do it now.
Mark, I was asked to notarize PTO paper. Can I do this? For the tricky trade?
You were notary.
Yeah.
You were the only notary around, or the only one that could do it. I mean, again, it's the spirit of what he was talking about. It's just yourself.
Yeah.
It's a one-off. You were there, you were notarized.
Yeah, it's all that. I don't get paid for
He
that.
wants to get back to a wonderful job.
I do it. I always do it for free. Anybody can do it. Yeah. Okay.
If you
Since you want to start advertising yourself as this non-board member.
Exactly.
Oh, we're staying here?
Let's go.
Are we done? Close the meeting? I know we're going to a session.
That's in the restroom.
Reconvene and open, right?
Don't we have to close this part of the meeting and then go to close?
Yes.
Sorry, I know you gave it to me. Oh, here it is. We'll put the lights back in? No. Okay, it's romantic, thank you. Okay, where am I at now? Closed session? Okay, gonna go into, have a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Any discussion, approval, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Can you do a roll call? Okay. That's okay. Whereas the Board of Education must discuss matters that are, Jesus Christ, are not appropriate for discussion in a public meeting, and whereas the subjects are with the exception, I can't even see this, exceptions of the Open Public Meetings Act, and are permitted to be discussed in closed session pursuant NJSA 10-4-12B. And whereas the Board of Education intends to discuss matters as follows. NJSA 10-4-12B, HIB case A and B. Whereas the length of the closed session is estimated to be about 20-30 minutes, after which the public meeting of the board shall reconvene and action will not be taken. Therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Education will recess into closed session for only the afforded subjects. And be it further resolved, the Board of Education hereby declares that the discussion of the aforesaid subject will be made public at a time when the public interest in disclosure is greater than any privacy or governmental interest being protected from disclosure in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
So we're going to end the live stream. So all in favor of that motion?
Aye.
So we'll be ending the live stream now, and the board will be going down to room 129 for closed session, and we'll end the open meeting from there.
Okay, thank you so much, and see you Wednesday.
I'll take your